The most powerful man in Korea was on his knees in a sterile hospital hallway, begging a god he never believed in for a drop of blood. Kang Dae-Hyun, Seoul's most feared underground king, the man who could make people disappear with a phone call, who controlled half the city's illegal operations with absolute authority, was completely powerless. His 9-year-old son, Min-ho, was dying of stage 4 leukemia, and the only thing that could save him was a transplant from someone with golden blood, a blood type so rare it practically didn't exist. The doctors had given him 48 hours, maybe less. What this godfather of Seoul didn't know was that the miracle he was praying for was sleeping 3 floors below him in a cramped charity ward. A 7-year-old girl in a yellow dress named Choi Hana, the daughter of a woman he was actively destroying through his predatory loan business, was about to become his son's only hope for survival. In 48 hours, this small child would do something that would break a mafia boss completely. Not with violence, not with money, but with pure, unconditional kindness that he couldn't buy, couldn't threaten, couldn't control. But the real shock wasn't the donation. It was what Dae-Hyun built from the ashes of his own brutality. Here's what nobody tells you about what happens when a child's innocence collides with underground power in Korea. This is the true story of how one 7-year-old girl saved a dying boy and destroyed a criminal empire in 48 hours, replacing it with something beautiful. By the end of this, you'll understand why the man who once ruled through fear is now Seoul's most generous protector of sick children, and why the little girl in the yellow dress chose to save a stranger's life when she owed him nothing but hatred. Before we get into the transformation, and trust me, it's coming, hit that subscribe button because next we're dropping more stories like this, and you're not going to want to miss that. Now let's get into this. Dae-Hyun's phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m. with the message that would change everything. Match found, golden blood. Patient ID C2847, Choi Hana, age 7. He stared at the screen, his hands shaking for the first time in 20 years. A match, after 3 weeks of searching every hospital database in Korea, bribing doctors across 5 countries, even flying in specialists from Switzerland. They'd found her. A 7-year-old girl with blood so rare that only 43 people in the entire world shared her type. Get me everything on this family, he barked at his assistant, Young-woo, who'd been sleeping on the hospital waiting room chairs. Parents' address, medical history, bank accounts, everything now. 15 minutes later, Young-woo returned, his face pale in a way that had nothing to do with exhaustion. Boss, there's a problem. I don't care if they want 10 million, 20 million, whatever it takes. It's not about money, Young-woo's voice cracked. The mother, Choi Min-seo, she's on our collection list. Building 47, apartment 203. She owes us 85 million won. The words hit Dae-Hyun like a physical blow. He grabbed the tablet from Young-woo's hands, scrolling through the file with growing horror. There it was in black and white. Choi Min-seo, widowed 3 years ago, borrowed money to pay for her husband's cancer treatment, failed to keep up with the interest rates, which his company had deliberately designed to be impossible to maintain. Current debt with compound interest, 127 million won. Eviction notice filed 2 weeks ago. Scheduled enforcement next Monday. He was actively destroying the family of the only person who could save his son. The irony wasn't lost on him. For 20 years, he'd built an empire on the desperation of people exactly like Choi Min-seo. Single mothers, struggling families, people who had nowhere else to turn. He'd convinced himself it was just business, that he was providing a service, that if they couldn't pay, that was their problem. Now God or the universe, or whatever cruel force governed the world, was holding up a mirror. Boss, what do you want me to do? Dae-Hyun looked through the glass partition at Min-ho, his beautiful boy connected to machines that were doing the work his body couldn't anymore. His son, who still believed his father was a good man, who thought Dae-Hyun's security business meant protecting people, not extorting them. Cancel the eviction, he said quietly. Forgive the debt, all of it, sir, and send flowers, expensive ones, to her apartment. His voice hardened with the commanding tone that made grown men flinch. Then schedule a meeting. I need to ask a mother if I can borrow her daughter's blood to save my son's life. And I need her to say yes. What he didn't say. I need her to say yes even though I've spent 3 years making her life a living hell. The flowers arrived at 6 a.m. 200 white roses in a crystal vase that cost more than Choi Min-seo's monthly rent. The card was simple. Please come to Seoul National Hospital, room 347. Your daughter can save a life. I'll explain everything. When Min-seo walked into that hospital room 4 hours later, clutching Hana's small hand, she recognized Dae-Hyun immediately. Not from photos, not from news reports. from the signature at the bottom of every debt collection notice that had been destroying her life for 3 years. She froze in the doorway, her grip on Hana tightening. Dae-Hyun stood slowly, and for the first time in 2 decades, he had no idea what to say. This woman had every reason to spit in his face, to turn around and walk out, to let his son die as payment for what he'd done to her family. "Mrs. Choi," he started, his voice rough. "Thank you for coming. I know you have no reason to help me. I know what my company has done to you. But my son is dying, and your daughter, is she sick too?" The question came from Hana, who'd slipped past her mother and was standing at Min-ho's bedside, studying the pale boy with the kind of solemn curiosity only children possess. She was exactly as the file described, 7 years old, thin from too many skipped meals, wearing a yellow dress that had been washed so many times the color was fading. "Hana, come back here," Min-seo whispered urgently, but Hana ignored her, reaching out to touch Min-ho's hand where it lay limp on the white sheets. "He looks lonely, like he's been sick for a very long time." Dae-Hyun's throat tightened. "He has. The doctors say he needs special blood to get better. Blood like yours." Hana looked up at him then, and Dae-Hyun felt something crack inside his chest. Her eyes were too old for 7, carrying the weight of a childhood spent watching her mother cry over bills, of understanding poverty in ways no child should. "Will it hurt? A little, like getting a shot, but it will save his life." She considered this, then looked back at Min-ho. "He's your son." "Yes, and you love him very much, more than anything in this world." Hana nodded, making some kind of decision in that mysterious way children do. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll be brave." She turned to her mother, whose eyes were already brimming with tears. "It's okay, Mama. I can help him." Dae-Hyun had faced down rival gangs, had stared at guns pointed at his head, had negotiated million-dollar deals without flinching. But watching this small girl promise to be brave while he stood there, the man who'd been making her mother's life unbearable, undid him completely. He dropped to one knee, meeting her at eye level. "Thank you," he whispered, and his voice broke on the words. "You're saving everything I love." Hana smiled, small and sweet. That's what heroes do. The procedure was supposed to take 3 hours. It had been 5, and the surgical team still hadn't emerged. Dae-Hyun paced the hallway like a caged animal, his expensive Italian shoes wearing a path in the linoleum. 6 of his men lined the corridor, all dressed in black suits, all trying not to look at their boss's face because the expression there was dangerous. When the complication alarm went off at hour 4, everything went to hell. Dr. Park, the head of pediatric oncology, came through the doors with his surgical mask pulled down and his face grave. "Mr. Kang, there's been a development. Is my son alive?" Dae-Hyun's voice was ice over lava. "Yes, but the transfusion isn't taking as smoothly as we hoped. Min-ho's body is rejecting." Dae-Hyun grabbed the doctor by his scrubs, slamming him against the wall. His bodyguards moved forward instantly, creating a wall between the medical staff and their boss. "You said this would work. You said the golden blood was a perfect match." "Mr. Kang, please." Dr. Park's voice remained steady despite the forearm pressed against his chest. "This happens sometimes. We need to slow the rate. Monitor more carefully. It's going to take longer, but we can manage this. And the girl, Hana, she's stable, brave as anything. But we can't rush this process, or we risk both children." Young-woo appeared at Dae-Hyun's elbow. "Boss, you need to let him go. Let them work." But Dae-Hyun couldn't. For 20 years, he'd solved every problem with money or force. He'd built an empire on the principle that enough pressure, enough fear, enough power could bend reality to his will. And now he was standing in a hospital hallway, completely impotent, watching his son die while a 7-year-old girl he'd been indirectly torturing tried to save him. "If my son dies because you incompetent." "Mr. Kang," a new voice sharp and fearless. Nurse Kim, a woman in her 50s who'd been working pediatric oncology for 30 years, and had seen enough grief to be immune to intimidation. "Threatening my doctors won't save your son. It will distract them from doing their jobs. Is that what you want?" The hallway went silent. Nobody spoke to Dae-Hyun like that. Nobody. Young-woo's hand moved inside his jacket. The other bodyguards shifted, ready. But Nurse Kim didn't even blink. "Your violence stops at my operating room door. In there we save children. Out here, you can be whatever monster you need to be. But if you want your boy to see tomorrow, you'll sit down, shut up, and let us work." Dae-Hyun released Dr. Park slowly, his hands shaking with suppressed rage and fear. The doctor straightened his scrubs, nodded once, and disappeared back through the surgical doors. Nurse Kim lingered just long enough to say, "That little girl in there is braver than every man in this hallway combined, including you." Then she was gone too, leaving Dae-Hyun alone with the truth. For the first time in his life, his power meant absolutely nothing. Hour 7, The doors finally opened. Dr. Park emerged, exhausted but smiling. It worked. The transfusion stabilized. Both children are in recovery. Dae-Hyun didn't wait for permission. He pushed past the medical team and into the recovery room where Min-ho lay, still pale but breathing steadily, color slowly returning to his cheeks. Hana was in the bed beside him, already awake, her mother stroking her hair and whispering soft words in Korean. Dae-Hyun collapsed into the chair beside his son's bed, his hand finding Min-ho's small one. The boy's fingers twitched, then curled around his father's palm. "Appa," Min-ho's voice was barely a whisper, raspy from the breathing tube. "I'm here, son, I'm right here." Min-ho's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then landing on his father's face. He smiled, that beautiful smile that had sustained Dae-Hyun through every dark moment of the past 3 weeks. "The doctors said a little girl saved me. Is that true?" "Yes," Dae-Hyun's voice cracked. "Her name is Hana. She was very brave." Min-ho turned his head slightly, seeing Hana for the first time, even exhausted, even recovering from a procedure that had drained her tiny body. She managed to wave at him. "Hi," she whispered. "I'm glad you're okay." Min-ho smiled back, then looked at his father again. His next question came so quietly Dae-Hyun almost didn't hear it. "Appa, are you a good man?" The world stopped. Dae-Hyun had been asked many things in his life. He'd been questioned by police, interrogated by rivals, challenged by politicians, but nothing had ever hit him like his 9-year-old son's simple question. "Why do you ask that?" "Because," Min-ho's eyes were heavy, struggling to stay open. "The nurses whisper about you, about what you do, about how people are scared of you. And I always tell them you're good because you're my Appa. You protect people, right? That's what you said, you keep people safe." Dae-Hyun looked across the room at Min-seo, who was pointedly not meeting his eyes, at Hana, who'd just given her blood to save a stranger, because it was the right thing to do, at Young-woo standing by the door, who'd been with him long enough to know exactly what kind of man his boss really was. Dae-Hyun started, then stopped. He'd built an empire on lies, on manipulation, on making people believe he was something he wasn't. But he couldn't lie to Min-ho, not anymore. Not while holding the hand of a child who was only alive because of a little girl his business had been destroying. "I haven't been," he said finally, the words tasting like ash, "but I'm going to be. I promise you, son, I'm going to be the man you think I am." Min-ho smiled, trusting, believing. "I knew it," he whispered, then drifted back to sleep. And Dae-Hyun sat there, holding his son's hand, finally understanding what it meant to be truly powerless against your own conscience. They moved Min-ho to a private suite on the top floor, the kind of room that didn't officially exist on hospital maps, reserved for politicians, celebrities, and men like Dae-Hyun, who could afford to buy silence along with medical care. The room was all navy blues and charcoal grays, leather furniture and mahogany accents, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, a second bedroom for family, a conference table that had hosted more business deals than family dinners. It was Min-ho's prison for the next 2 weeks, while his body learned to accept Hana's gift. On day 3, something unexpected happened. Min-seo appeared at the door with Hana, holding a plastic bag from a convenience store. She looked uncomfortable, out of place in her faded jeans and worn cardigan, standing in a room that cost more per night than she made in a month. The doctors said it would be good for them to see each other. She explained, not quite meeting Dae-Hyun's eyes. Something about psychological recovery. Hana wanted to come. Before Dae-Hyun could respond, Hana had already spotted Min-ho sitting up in bed, looking bored and restless in expensive silk pajamas. "Hi," she waved, all 7-year-old enthusiasm. "You look better, not so ghost-like anymore." Min-ho laughed, the sound so unexpected and pure that Dae-Hyun felt his throat tighten. His son hadn't laughed in months. "Want to see what I brought?" Hana pulled crayons and coloring books from the plastic bag, the cheap kind from the convenience store that cost 2,001. "Mama said you might be bored." She climbed onto Min-ho's bed without hesitation, spreading out her treasures. Construction paper in bright pinks and yellows, stickers with cartoon characters, a small stuffed rabbit with one ear slightly torn. The contrast was jarring. Hana's bright yellow dress against the charcoal sheets, her dollar store crayons on the mahogany bedside table, her pure, uncomplicated joy filling a room that had only known tension and fear. "Can you draw?" she asked Min-ho. I don't know. I haven't tried in a while." "It's easy, look." She started sketching something with fierce concentration, her tongue poking out slightly. "This is you and me, see? We're both superheroes now because we share special blood." Min-ho picked up a crayon tentatively, then another within minutes. They were coloring together, Hana narrating elaborate stories about the pictures they were creating, Min-ho adding details and laughing at her wild imagination. Dae-Hyun stood by the window, watching his son come alive in ways no expensive treatment had managed. Watching Pink and Yellow and Joy bleed into the cold, controlled world he'd built. Min-seo moved beside him, her voice quiet. She talks about him constantly, about her friend Min-ho, who needed special blood. She doesn't understand everything that happened, but she's happy she could help. She saved his life, Dae-Hyun said simply. Yes, Min-seo's voice hardened slightly. And you tried to destroy ours. He turned to face her fully. I know, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making that right. Young-woo found his boss on the hospital rooftop at 3 a.m., smoking a cigarette he hadn't touched in 5 years. Below them, Seoul sprawled in neon and shadow, a city Dae-Hyun had spent 2 decades carving into his own image. You wanted to see me, boss. Dae-Hyun didn't turn around. How many families do we have on collection in Hana's neighborhood? Building 47, maybe 30 active accounts. Why? Not just Building 47, the whole district, Iri-Wendong, all of it. Young-woo pulled out his phone, scrolling through files. 143 active loans, total outstanding debt with interest, around 18 billion won. 18 billion won. 2 decades of carefully calculated misery. Single mothers like Min-seo, struggling shop owners, families who'd made one desperate choice and spent years drowning in the consequences. Cancel them. The phone nearly slipped from Young-woo's hands. Boss, every debt in that district, forgive it. All of it. Dae-Hyun finally turned, and his face was set with the kind of determination Young-woo recognized. The same look he'd had when he took over the organization at 25, when he'd expanded into 5 new territories, when he'd decided something was going to happen and nothing would stop him. Sir, that's a significant portion of our income. The board won't. I don't care what the board thinks. I own the board. He dropped the cigarette, crushing it under his heel. That little girl in there gave her blood to save my son. She didn't ask for anything, didn't negotiate, didn't even hesitate. She just said, I'll be brave, and did it. His voice cracked slightly. And we've been bleeding her mother dry for 3 years. Boss, I understand the sentiment, but do you? Dae-Hyun's voice went cold. Do you understand what it's like to watch your son ask if you're a good man, while the child who saved his life can't afford decent clothes? To see her mother's face when she walks into a room that costs more per night than she'll see in 6 months. Young-woo was quiet. I built this empire on people's desperation. Told myself it was just business, that I was providing a service. Dae-Hyun laughed, bitter and hollow. But I was just a predator in an expensive suit, and my son almost paid the price for my sins. What do you want me to do? Tomorrow morning, I want you to gather every debt record for Iri-Wendong. Physical files, digital records, everything, then I want you to burn them. He looked at Young-woo directly. In front of me, I want to watch every single page turn to ash. The other districts will hear about this. They'll expect the same treatment. Good, Dae-Hyun's smile was sharp. Dangerous, let them. We're done destroying families. From now on, we protect them. Boss, if we're not collecting debts, how do we? I'll figure it out, but this ends now. Hana gave life, I'm done taking it. Day 7, Min-ho was finally strong enough to walk. Not far, just from his bed to the window and back. But it was progress. Real, measurable progress that made the doctors smile and nod approvingly. His color was returning. That sickly gray pallor fading into something closer to the healthy glow Dae-Hyun remembered from before the diagnosis. Hana came to visit every afternoon now. Min-seo had stopped asking permission, stopped looking uncomfortable. She'd simply show up at 3 p.m. with her daughter, stay for an hour, then leave. A routine that felt almost normal. Today, Hana brought a book. Something about dragons and princesses that she couldn't quite read yet, but knew by heart from her mother's bedtime recitations. Want to hear a story? She asked Min-ho, already climbing onto his bed. Sure, Min-ho shifted to make room, and Dae-Hyun watched his son's face light up in ways it hadn't in months. Not the polite smile he gave doctors, not the brave face he wore for his father. Real joy. Hana opened the book, her small finger tracing words she couldn't decode. Once upon a time, there was a princess who was very sick, and a brave knight who went on a quest to find the magic potion to save her. Isn't it usually the prince who saves the princess? Min-ho asked. Not in my stories, Hana grinned. In my stories, girls can be knights too. Min-ho considered this, then smiled. Not his usual reserved expression. A full, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. I like that better. They read together for an hour, Hana narrating with wild enthusiasm, adding details that definitely weren't in the book. Min-ho laughing at her embellishments, occasionally correcting her more outrageous inventions, then laughing harder when she insisted her version was better. At one point, Hana paused mid-sentence. Min-ho, yeah, are we friends now? Real friends? Min-ho's expression went serious. We share blood, That makes us more than friends, like family. Hana's face lit up. Really? Really? My blood is your blood now. That's what the doctors said. So you're like my brother. If you want. Hana threw her arms around him in an enthusiastic hug that made Min-seo gasp and move forward, worried about disturbing medical equipment. But Min-ho just hugged back, careful but genuine. I always wanted a brother, Hana whispered. Me too, Min-ho said. I mean, a sibling, sister works too. Dae-Hyun stood by the window, watching the bright sun he'd almost lost embrace the first girl who'd saved him. Two children from completely different worlds, connected now by something deeper than blood. By choice, by kindness, by the kind of pure, uncomplicated love that adults spent lifetimes trying to remember. Min-seo moved beside him, her voice soft. They're good for each other. Yes, Dae-Hyun agreed. They are. And in that moment, watching his son smile, truly smile, for the first time in 8 months, Dae-Hyun understood what he'd been missing his entire life. Not power, not control, not money. Just this simple, honest connection. The warehouse in Gangnam had been Dae-Hyun's most profitable operation. 40,000 square feet of prime real estate where counterfeit luxury goods moved through Seoul's underground like water. Designer handbags, watches, electronics. Clean, relatively victimless crime that generated 3 billion won annually. Young-woo stared at the demolition permit like it was written in a foreign language. You want to tear it down, not tear down, convert. Dae-Hyun spread architectural plans across the hood of his car, the warehouse looming behind them. The bones are good, the location is central, perfect for what I have in mind, which is a pediatric cancer treatment center, free care for families who can't afford it, state-of-the-art equipment, the best doctors money can buy. He pointed to different sections of the blueprint. 20 treatment rooms here, family housing here, a play area here because kids shouldn't spend their whole childhood in hospital beds. Young-woo was quiet for a long moment. Boss, the board is already furious about the debt forgiveness. This will. The board works for me? Dae-Hyun's voice went hard. Not the other way around. Anyone who has a problem with this can leave. I'll buy them out. This is going to cost hundreds of millions, maybe billions. I have billions. He rolled up the plans. I made that money destroying families. Time I spent some rebuilding them. 3 months later, the Kang Min-ho Pediatric Cancer Center opened its doors. The name had been Min-ho's idea. Shy but proud when his father asked permission, Hana had been there for the ribbon cutting, wearing a new yellow dress that actually fit, standing between Min-ho and Dae-Hyun as cameras flashed. The building was beautiful. Warm woods and soft lighting instead of sterile white. Windows everywhere, flooding the space with natural light. Art on the walls painted by former patients. A garden courtyard where children could play when they felt strong enough. The first family through the doors was a couple from Busan. Their daughter, barely 6 years old, had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. They'd sold everything they owned to afford 2 rounds of chemotherapy and were preparing to give up, to take her home and make her comfortable. Now they stood in the gleaming lobby, crying as Dr. Park explained that treatment would be completely free, that their daughter would get the best care available, that they could stay in the family housing as long as needed. Dae-Hyun watched from his office on the 2nd floor, Min-ho beside him. Appa, yes, son, is this what being a good man looks like? Dae-Hyun looked at his son, healthy now, thriving, his color fully returned. Looked down at the family, whose world had just shifted from hopeless to hopeful. Thought about Hana and her yellow dress and her promise to be brave. I think so, he said quietly. I think it's a start. 6 months after the center opened, Dae-Hyun found himself in the rooftop garden at sunset, watching Min-ho and Hana chase each other through the carefully maintained flower beds. Min-ho was in full remission now, hair growing back, energy restored, looking like any other 10-year-old boy who'd never spent months fighting for his life. Hana had sprouted up, nearly 8 now, still wearing yellow dresses but nicer ones, the kind that didn't fade after 3 washes. They're beautiful together, Min-seo said, settling onto the bench beside him. She came twice a week now, bringing Hana to visit. Sometimes they stayed for dinner. Last month, Dae-Hyun had offered her a job managing the center's family services department. She'd accepted. She saved him, Dae-Hyun said simply, and he gave her a future. Min-seo gestured at the building below them, at the families moving through the lobby, at the hope that hadn't existed 6 months ago. This place, what you're building, it's bigger than one child. It started with one child. He watched Hana catch Min-ho, both of them collapsing in giggles on the grass. A 7-year-old girl who promised to be brave. The golden hour light painted everything warm, soft, so different from the cold blues and grays that used to define his world. Below them, Seoul sprawled, still his city in many ways, but he was learning to hold it differently. Not with a closed fist, but with open hands. Young-woo appeared in the garden doorway. "Boss, the board is here. They want to discuss the expansion plans. Tell them I'll be down in 10 minutes. When Young-woo left, Min-seo asked quietly, "Do you miss it, the old life?" Dae-Hyun considered the question honestly. Did he miss the power, the fear in people's eyes, the absolute control? "No," he said finally. "I thought I would. Thought I'd built my entire identity on being feared. But I was wrong." He pointed at Min-ho. "That's my legacy now, not the empire. Not the money, not the control. Him alive, healthy, learning to be kind because he watched someone be kind to him." "Kang Dae-Hyun," Min-seo said with the hint of a smile. "Great honor, your name means great honor. Did you know that? My father told me it meant I was destined for greatness, that I should demand respect, take what I wanted, rule without mercy. And what do you think it means now?" He watched his son help Honor up from the grass, both of them brushing dirt off their clothes. Watched them run toward the garden beds, where other children from the center were planting flowers, joining in without hesitation. "I think," Dae-Hyun said slowly, "that true honor comes from protecting life, not taking it, from building sanctuaries instead of empires, from teaching my son that bravery looks like a 7-year-old girl in a yellow dress saying, 'I'll help,' when she had every reason to say no." Min-seo stood, smoothing her skirt. "Then you're finally living up to your name." And as the golden hour faded into twilight, as his son's laughter echoed through the garden, Dae-Hyun understood that he'd finally become the man Min-ho always believed he was. Not through power, through redemption. "You made it this far, I need to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me. Have you ever witnessed someone completely transform their life? Maybe someone who went from causing harm to healing it. Or have you ever forgiven someone who didn't deserve it, and watched that forgiveness change them? I want to know your story. Hit that subscribe button right now, because next week's story is about how Hana and Min-ho grow up together. And trust me, it involves a teenage romance that Dae-Hyun absolutely does not approve of. A rebellious phase that turns the cancer center upside down, and a choice that will test everything this found family has built. You're not going to want to miss that. Until then, remember this. True power isn't about control. It's about choosing to heal instead of hurt. It's about building sanctuaries instead of empires. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let a child's innocence show you who you're meant to become. One small act of kindness can destroy an empire of cruelty and replace it with something beautiful.